PG&E's monopoly territory is home to 17 million people.
Families already struggle to pay their bills.
PG&E was convicted of 91 felonies.
Really? I mean, what's next?
Greybeard Talks Solar. He is SolarWise.
Welcome to the Greybeard Talks Solar YouTube channel. I'm so glad that you're here. This is a place where we talk about all the ins and outs of what's happening in the solar industry, more specifically, mostly in the California market. That's where we live, and that's where the business SolarWise is located. And so thank you so much for joining the video. Today, we are going to be talking about how much value does solar add to your home. This is a big question that we get often in conversations with homeowners. I've addressed it many times on my radio program, but I'm going to deep dive into it a little bit today to get you all up to speed on the value of solar as it relates to your particular home. Is it an investment that you can make? Can you count on it adding value? If so, how much value might you see? So please like, share, and subscribe if you find the information I'm about to share with you to be insightful, entertaining, and most of all, wisdom-wise producing. So hopefully giving you some solar wisdom here, helping to make you solar wise. All right, so let's jump into it. So in relation to solar and adding value to your particular property, there's been studies that have been done on this. Companies such as Zillow have remarked and shared information relative to the value that solar might add on properties. They've looked at their own algorithm, transactions, houses with solar, houses without solar, and come up with some sort of consensus as to what they believe the value addition is of adding a solar system to your home. So first and foremost, why would solar add any value to your house at all? What's the mindset or what's the logic behind that particular assumption? Well, first and foremost, it's about cost mitigation. So simply stated, think of it this way, and this is going to be a theme throughout today's discussion. The more caustic the rates, the more expensive the energy, the more potential value that solar might add to a property, because of the big four expenses of home ownership, it's the only, utility expenses are the only thing that you can actively and consciously cut or reduce. For example, you can't change anything about mortgage rates right now. They are where they are. You can't get necessarily a better rate. You can't change anything about property taxes. They are what they are. That's continuing to rise. And certainly in California, you can't change anything about hazard or fire insurance. Across the nation, that is something that's very caustic and getting more and more expensive every year. But of the big four, utilities now are the fourth one we'll talk about. It's the only thing that you can mitigate. It's the only thing that can help to reduce a home's cost of ownership if you have the benefit of solar. So Zillow did the study, as I'd mentioned before, and you can Google this online. Zillow came up with an average value increase that solar may credit to a home of approximately 4%. Now, I don't love this. I don't even really like this number because I think it's too general an estimation of value with the complex real estate market, variables that play into it. So let me give you an example. So Zillow looked at all the properties that had sold, not sold, solar, not solar, and then came up with a mathematical consensus that it's about a 4% value increase. But here's where I take some exception to that, or have some criticism around it, right? So let's say you've got a house in SMUD territory in Sacramento Municipal Utility District. SMUD is cheaper than the most expensive utility in California, which is PG&E. But SMUD, let's say you have a house in SMUD territory, and let's say it's a 4,000 square foot home, and the value of it is, for sake of this conversation, let's say the value of it is $2 million, okay? Big house, right? And let's say because of that house, its location, and the fact that it's a newer home, it's very energy efficient. In SMUD territory, I've seen 4,000 square foot houses with $200 utility bills, okay, a month average. Now, outside of that, in rural parts of Northern California and PG&E territory, I've seen houses that are under 1,000 square feet, let's say 900 square feet. I've seen houses like that with $600 a month or greater, monthly electricity bills. So going back to the prior example, let's assume it's a house that's $2 million in SMUD territory. Homeowner adds solar to it. Are we actually saying that adding solar to that $2 million house is going to create $80,000 worth of extra value in the property just because there's a solar system there that might mitigate a $200 a month utility bill? No, I don't think that that's accurate. Now, having said that, if we go to a property that's more of a rural property, let's say it's a manufactured home, as an example, and let's say it's very energy inefficient, and that particular home has an estimated cost monthly of $600, $700, $800 a month. Adding solar to that property, and let's say the value of that property is $500,000. Adding solar to that property, I think, creates more value for that property and a future homeowner than the 20,000 or 4% estimation that we would gather from that. So I don't really like Zillow's study at all. Now, there was another study that was done, and I believe this particular study was done from a company in the Bay Area, some affiliation with Lawrence Livermore Labs. And I liked their study a lot more because it was effectively a study that looked at the net cost of energy for a particular home and came up with a value estimation relative to the amount of mitigation that you could achieve. So stated simply, they came up with a study that looked at thousands and thousands of homes, and they realized that for every dollar that you could mitigate in monthly electricity cost, you created about $20 of value in the mind of a purchaser that might buy that particular property. So think of it this way. Let's say that you could, with solar, mitigate a $2,000 a year utility expense with the PG&E or any other utility. This study came to the conclusion that if you can mitigate that $2,000, that in other words, when the system's installed, that homeowner isn't going to have that obligation, isn't going to have that debt, or excuse me, that monthly burden. It created an additional $20 in value for every dollar. So 2,000 times 20, it's a $40,000 value increase. I think that's more accurate and more meaningful of an estimation of value than Zillow's acknowledgement of potentially a 4% value increase when you add solar. But let me step back a moment. Let me think about it this way. Obviously, solar is throughout the United States. Many different states, many different utilities, solar is throughout the country. So, for example, in the Texas area, you can get energy from dirty grid utility companies in Texas for under 10 cents a kilowatt hour, 4 to 9 cents a kilowatt hour, as an example. In California, PG&E territory, you're talking about 43 to 62 cents a kilowatt hour. So you're talking about, 4 to 6 times the cost of energy in California. So there isn't going to be a standard. Again, back to that example I gave previously, I think the value of adding solar is to your home, the value add to solar to your home is directly proportional to what it mitigates as an expense or the liability of not having it. What is it? How big of a dent does it make, and how much financial benefit do I gain by adding the solar? So stated a different way, in California, I think houses in PG&E territory that have solar, there's more value in the mind of a purchaser of that particular property for having a solar system than somebody might have for buying a property, for example, in the Roseville market in California that has some of the cheapest energy in all of California itself. So if somebody's familiar with how expensive energy is in a particular region, PG&E territory, and they have firsthand experience of that, and they look at a house that already has solar, I think that buyer is going to assign more value to that house having a solar system than somebody that's unfamiliar. Let's say somebody moves from out of state into California, and they're looking at a home in PG&E territory, and their experience with utilities in another state was not nearly as expensive or caustic as it is in California, they may not be unaware of how expensive their utility bills could be in the summertime in California, and so they might not assign as much value to it. So we're getting to the general point I'm trying to make. Everybody agrees that solar adds a certain amount of value to a property. Everyone disagrees on exactly how much value that is. And I'm trying to make the case that I think experientially, if you go to sell your house and it has a solar system on it, I think people that are very familiar with the utility expense in that particular area, I think that maybe have owned solar before and seen the benefit of it themselves, I think they're going to add value, and maybe more value than you might think, to the fact that that house is now solar equipped. Let's look at it from the opposite direction, okay, just for a moment. Let's assume energy rates in California continue to skyrocket. Let's assume that they get more and more expensive, more and more caustic to homeowners as time goes on, which I think is actually going to happen. There was a recent study done that the last 10 years in California, depending on whether you were San Diego Gas and Electric, Edison, or PG&E, the big three utilities in California, your rates have effectively doubled in the last 8 to 10 years. But let's assume that continues, or that yet even the worse is yet to come, that it could get even more expensive in the next 10 years. So 5 or 10 years out, you have a house, you go to sell it, you're going to sell it in PG&E territory, which is super expensive, and you don't have solar. So people come, they tour the house, they might love the house, but they can also tour another house down the street that makes its own power and can help mitigate $700, $800, $900, $1,000 a month in utility cost. When they see that, aren't they going to look at the house that doesn't have solar and go, that house is actually, even though it's the same price, it's actually going to be more expensive for us to own because there is no mitigation of any of the utility expense monthly. So stated differently, I think houses in the future that sell in PG&E territory, for example, that don't have solar, I think those houses are going to be at a selling disadvantage against houses that do provide some sort of mitigation, do provide some sort of cost decrease on the energy expenses because of the benefit of solar. So think of it that way. So very long discussion, and I know many of you were probably hoping for a solidified, certain answer. Yep, if I add solar, it's going to add this much value to the property. That's difficult to do for many reasons, as I've already stated. If you're in an area that is really inexpensive for utilities, which is rare in California, then I don't think adding solar adds near as much value. But let's take a separate aside just for a moment. As many of you may be aware, if you live in California, there was recently, in the last couple of years, a big change to the crediting rate that you get for excess energy that a system generates that the home isn't consuming. So we're talking about NEM 2, Net Energy Metering 2.0, the old way that solar worked in California, versus NEM 3, which is the current iteration that took effect in April of 2023. So NEM 2 systems, which would be recognized if you live in California, if you have a true-up bill with your utility, you have a NEM 2 system. You most likely probably don't have battery storage because effectively with a Net Energy Metering 2.0 system, the utility acts like a battery for you in terms of the excess energy. So when the sun hits the panels, first energy that's made is inside the home. That home consumes it. If there's surplus energy, that energy gets exported to the utility, and the utility gives you a 1-to-1 credit. You send them 10 watts of energy, they store it for you, they reconcile that, they give you the 10 watts of energy back at no degradation, no loss. So again, effectively acting like a battery for most folks. NEM 3 systems, the way it works now, same solar system, energy's consumed in the house. If there's excess, now you want battery storage, because if you put 10 watts into a battery, you can pull 10 watts out for free. There's no loss. But if you send the energy to the utility, they're going to keep effectively about 75% of it. So instead of acting like a battery for homeowners like they used to. Utilities now in California are acting more like a thief. They confiscate 75% of the energy you send them, which makes no sense in the world because it's your system, your energy, your home. You sent them power that they didn't have to buy or make themselves. So why don't you get full value credit? But again, this is the infinite wisdom of the CPUC in California that made this decision. So here's the point I wanted to make. If you go to sell a house that has a NEM 2 system, so solar that was installed before April of 2023, you were grandfathered into that one-to-one, much more valuable compensation for that excess energy that's sent to it. You're grandfathered into that structure for 20 years past when the system went live. So here's my contention. If you're selling a home in California, in PG&E territory that has an older NEM 2 system, remember, you have a true-up bill. I think those solar systems are more valuable than a system now that's available, which would be a NEM 3 system. So in other words, if a homeowner bought a house without solar and added a system, their system isn't going to have the one-to-one credit. So if you were looking at two different houses exactly the same, one makes its own power with solar and has full value, 100% credit, for any of that excess energy, and no need for batteries because you get that credit. And another one that has batteries, but it's a 75% reduced credit. Which one would you pay more money for? Which one would you perceive to be more valuable? Probably the one that has the one-to-one credit. So there's some complexity to that issue. And then we get into, lastly, and I'm not going to deep dive into this because I think it gets way too complex. Is there a value difference in terms of adding solar to a home if it's an owned system? In other words, you paid cash for it, you own it, there's no debt, versus a system that's a lease or a loan. And I definitely think owned systems, in terms of the value that they might add to a property in the mind of a buyer, is greater than something like a financed or a lease system, because effectively, if you finance or lease a system and you still have some sort of remaining obligation on that, you've got to get a buyer to not only fall in love with your house, but fall in love with your solar loan as well, or solar lease, to then take it over, or they might negotiate with you to have it paid off before they buy the house because they just don't want to deal with it. So I think there's definitely a value difference with owned systems versus leases or finance systems. But hear me now with this point. Any type of solar benefit is going to be more valuable than none. Okay. Going back to that other example that I said, if you go to sell a house in California in the next 5 or 10 years and you don't have solar on it, I think you're going to be at a selling disadvantage compared to all of your neighbors' houses and all of the other houses in the community that may make their own power or have some sort of substantial benefit because of solar. So hopefully that helped to shed some light. I can't give you a definitive answer. This is way too complex. Real estate values, solar systems, utility costs. There is no set, steadfast answer to that equation, but I gave you hopefully a lot of food for thought to consider. Now, if you don't currently have solar and you'd like to look into it, all you got to do, if you want to engage us and our resources, if you text YouTube, that one word YouTube to 84503 on your smartphone, just that one text, YouTube to 84503. We'll be in touch. We'll help you to sort out your current situation, explore different solar options, and whether or not it might help to save you some money for you and your family. So text YouTube to 84503. And one last thing. Thanks for watching the Greybeard Talks Solar channel, where a little wisdom goes a long way toward turning sunshine into serious savings. Don't forget to smash the like, share, and subscribe buttons if you found this to be valuable and or entertaining. Thank you so much for joining me, and I'll see you same place, same time next week. We launch this video every Monday at 9 a.m. Pacific. So look forward to this coming week and what we talk about next. So thanks again for watching the show.
Thanks for listening to SolarWise, Greybeard Talks Solar. Please visit our website, solarwiseco.com, to learn more. And we will see you next time on SolarWise.